Okay, so we're here at Ohayocon 2010, and we're here with a very, very special guest.
Carl Horn from Dark Horse Comics.
So, in case you don't know, this man is like really awesome and amazing. And if you never have gone to a convention where he's at, you're doing yourself a disservice. But to start off, just tell us about yourself. Let everyone know in the world who you are and what you do and why you do it.
Well, I'm a manga editor at Dark Horse Comics. I've been there since 2004. Before that, I worked at Viz Communications, now Viz LLC in San Francisco. And I began there in 1995 and started writing for them in 93. So I guess my professional work in this field goes back to the early 90s. I get into this, like most people, because I'm an anime and manga fan. I discovered anime and manga pretty much in the early 80s. In those days, there weren't any anime conventions per se, but when I was a kid, I used to play role-playing games, Advanced D&D, first edition. And so you go to other conventions, and people would exploit these cons, parasitical, latch anime onto it, a science fiction con or a gaming con. So one convention I went to, they were showing a anime called Space Pirate Captain Harlock. And sheer luck that it was subtitled. I say sheer luck because there was no fan subtitling in those days. Instead, what happened was that they would show Japanese programs on KIKU television in Honolulu, where there's a large Japanese-American community, and many of the Japanese series would be subtitled professionally for export. So if you had pen pals or knew somebody who was in Honolulu, they could send you copies of these tapes. And that's, I saw it on screen, suddenly like a spark leaped between the screen and me, and that's when I was otakuized. And this was in 1982. At the same time, the first manga being published in English came out. This is Barefoot Gen, which has finally seen the end of its release. Volume 10 has just come out from Last Gasp. Barefoot Gen was a good illustration of why manga used to be released in the U.S. before there was an industry. It wasn't released so much because, for manga fans per se, it was released by an anti-nuclear group who thought this would be an interesting way to show off the personal testimony of someone who had survived the horrors of Hiroshima in comic book format. But they weren't doing it as a manga per se. Nevertheless, for someone like myself who was looking for anything Japanese, it was pretty amazing. And it's a pretty amazing manga. One thing people forget about Barefoot Gen is it ran in Shonen Jump. It was intended as entertainment for kids, and I was a kid, but it was pretty hardcore. It wasn't, just some sort of lecture about war. I mean, they showed the effects.
Yeah.
They were awfully, grisly, and a lot of it talked about his family and how they were opposed to the war and what that meant in Japan. It meant getting beat up and harassed by the police and so forth. So it was some pretty intense stuff, for an 11-year-old at the time. Going back a little bit more technically, the first anime I saw was Speed Racer. I grew up in Iran before the revolution, and naturally. And Speed Racer was on Armed Forces radio television there. As I said, I kind of wonder sometimes whether Speed Racer is still on the air in Iran, but they made a few changes maybe to it.
Right.
Given CG to give him a little bit of beard.
There you go.
Put a little scarf on Trixie, and now every time he's racing against heretics and infidels.
Well, you'd have to.
Exactly.
Right.
But, so discovering it in the early 80s, and then pretty soon I was going to anime club meetings, the CFO, which was the first national club. Wasn't like Genshiken back then.
Right.
So, as a matter of fact, I was an unappreciative little brat, but I didn't really like the clubs. I was the youngest person there. There was nobody my age. There was nobody 13 or 14 who was into anime then. All the dudes, they looked like they were like 40 or 50. They were probably 25. But when you're that age,
They all look older.
They were old school fans, science fiction fans. I'd see this stuff. Yeah, man, this is great, man. I want to go skate, man. It's like I was feeling super energized by all this anime, and I would just see all these dudes sitting there, on couches like giant lumps, and think, Jesus, is that this is not it's not the way I feel about this stuff, man. So that kind of scared me off from clubs for a long time or forming any. But at my high school, we were fortunate that our high school had one of the first, Macs, and we used it, and I totally exploited it to promote anime. I was doing articles about Lupin III for my school paper. Now, dig, this is 1986.
Right.
Like, you couldn't buy it, you couldn't see it, it wasn't on TV or anything. So I don't know why I was doing it. I just wanted to let people know, like scanning, the back of, my MOOCs and all that. And I held a one-day Lupin convention at my school. We got a few people to cosplay. Lupin's not too tough to cosplay.
Right.
And we showed the 3 movies that were out then, and you had to get one of the teachers to agree to sponsor it, and she sat in the back for all 10 hours grading papers. Lupin stuff. At least it's not drugs. But and I started writing for convention programs. And the reason I bring this up is that's how I started getting experience that would serve me professionally. Recently, I sent a letter to my old high school English teacher thanking her. Why? Because she actually gave me the job skills that I used to get a paycheck every month. Like, what I learned in my English class was actually the stuff I ended up using to make a living. I couldn't write a coherent 5-paragraph essay when I came into that class, but when I left, I was able to. And she really, I didn't realize, like a lot of students don't realize that a lot of their teachers just don't care. They're just passing you along, and they're not really teaching you anything. You're not really making any progress. So my first paper in her class, she gave me an F, and I was totally shocked. I'd never gotten an F before, but I deserved an F. The other people had just been, too easy on me. And you can't teach, you got to show people where they're going wrong.
Yeah.
And so my next papers, I was getting Ds, then Cs, and finally I was making As in the course. Fortunately, she graded on improvement. But, if it were not for her, I wouldn't be able to work in this field. So this is really the story of my life, isn't it?
That is a really interesting story of your life, so we're down with that.
Yeah. The first fan subbing, as far as I know, started in 1986 with the Macross movie in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there was a group called Group Santa Cruz. I'm actually going to do a panel on this tomorrow, but there was a personal computer that came out from Commodore called the Amiga, and this was the first one that was designed for video applications. So previous to then, it was not, I don't think it was technically possible to actually do fan subtitling on a computer. There were dedicated hardware units you could get that would do titling. They generally only have enough memory for about a half hour, so you could do maybe a TV episode. So we began to think that we could do some fan subtitling of our own. Fan subtitling was very different back then in 1986, 87. First of all, of course, there was no World Wide Web. Connection speeds were like 300, baud.
Right, yeah.
I like to compare fan subtitling. It's like some deadly virus that's in a remote African village. But it only affects that village because there's no roads, there's no transport, so it stays there. But then one day they start clearing the forest and build these superhighways. Now suddenly the virus spreads everywhere in the world. That's what happened to fan subtitling. Back when fan subtitling had to literally be done on a physical tape that could only exist physically and had to be physically mailed to someone, it could only pose so much of a threat because its speed was slow. But when fan subtitling becomes something on the internet, and it can spread at the speed of light, well, that really has a much larger effect on the industry. And I don't mean to make excuses because I am in the industry, but it is true that when I started fan subtitling in '87, there was no industry here. There was no. It wasn't until 1988 that people actually started licensing anime and releasing it. I don't want to make this whole thing about fan sub go into more detail, but that did lead somewhere. My favorite anime film of all time, and still is today, was Gainax's first film, The Wings of Oniamis, Royal Space Force. And I wanted to fan subtitle that because back then it was not about who could get things out the quickest,
right,
or competing with other groups, because you didn't even know there were other groups, and nobody was keeping score. But Wings of Oniamis had a sort of failed release in Japan and America, and so I thought, this film's too good to be left by the wayside. I want more people to appreciate it. So when I started college, I would show it all around at my school. And remember how I said that I got a bad impression of anime clubs?
Right.
So I didn't form a club. Instead, I just treated it like you would show any other movie. It's like, hey, tonight we're showing Raiders of the Lost Ark. Tonight we're showing the Blues Brothers. Tonight we're showing Wings of Oniamis. I wanted to get people to start thinking of watching anime as normal. Like you watch it just like you would any other film. Yes, it's animated. Yes, it's Japanese. But you don't have to join a club or be in a sort of special group. The way I figured it, you didn't have to be in a special group in Japan. Why should you be in America?
It's just a medium for storytelling. It's,
Exactly. And I was really pleased to see the positive responses that my fellow students were giving it. I often thought that a lot of students in my college understood the film better than your average typical anime fan.
Right. Well, it helps that they're at college.
Well, also there's notorious, to give an example, what the most notorious scene in the film is a attempted rape scene.
Right.
And whereas a lot of anime fans have asked about what does that scene mean, or I don't get it, no one ever asked me that at college because it was, anime has a reputation for like tentacles and all that.
Yeah.
This is a very depressingly realistic depiction of what actual rape is like.
Yeah.
And, we always got told about, acquaintance rape and date rape, because they try to educate students about, how to behave towards other people with respect and so forth. And so people could see this as actually a pretty realistic scenario. And so people didn't see it as, it was sort of depressing, but it was realistic. So things like that, for example. So this really energized me because I thought, hey, maybe Americans can like this film after all. When I graduated in 1991, there was still no perception back then that you could actually work in the anime or manga industry. Back then, there might have been like 25 people total in the U.S. who worked in the industry. And besides, my parents, like most parents, they want you to get a respectable job. That's, they're being responsible. So they wanted me to be a lawyer and all that.
Of course.
I did end up going to law school. That was a little later. But I was back then we were called Generation X. And, we were slackers. It's like the grunge era.
Yep.
I had my flannel, big fan of Nirvana. And we were always told that we were the first, generation that was going to do worse than our parents. That may be true of the current generation. But anyway, so I sort of thought, after I graduated, I sort of boomeranged and lived at home for a few years. And I kind of thought, well, maybe I can somehow do something with this film. And I began to think about the public television. Because I knew that British science fiction had been on TV, like Doctor Who and Blake Seven.
Right.
And I thought, they show that stuff, and they're okay with a lot of sex and violence, and they're okay with foreign stuff, and they're okay with subtitled stuff. And I thought, maybe PBS could be the place that anime could be. I still kind of think this is kind of an opportunity that's, PBS could get a lot higher ratings. As you may know, the biggest problem with the U.S. anime market versus the Japanese is there's so little anime on TV here.
Yeah, because people, when they buy the manga, it's because they see the shows on TV and they go, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anime was never meant to be supported on home video alone. It certainly isn't in Japan. It's meant to be on television, and there's a dozen or 15 channels you can turn on and watch some anime in Japan. But there's very little of that in the U.S. Like Adult Swim, everyone's fighting over those few precious hours.
Yeah, and since, they make so much more money off their homegrown stuff rather than the anime stuff, they like to use that. And
that's right, and we have to remember that at the end of the day, anime is foreign television.
Yeah. And
naturally, people in America who make anime, their own animation, are going to say, why should we give this to a foreign, slot? There's American animators who need work. And that's understandable. You can understand that. We make good shows in this country.
Yeah.
I just like anime too. But so basically, and I guess I was like 21, 22 at the time, I formed a nonprofit corporation in Texas. And the idea was that I was going to get the rights to this film and show it on PBS. This is how naive I was. I thought that since the film had not been a success, that Bandai, its owners, didn't really care about it. I didn't realize that Bandai never forgets about anything.
Right.
So, I started, but I needed money. I needed to start researching grants and all that. I started, there are, trying to think of, I think there are at least 2 jobs I've gotten specifically because I was an otaku. That is, I didn't get them because they said, you're an otaku, here's the job. I got them because I realized I could exploit them as an otaku.
Right.
And one of them was my first job out of college, which was audiovisual librarian at the Texas Medical Center. Why did I get that? Because the keyword is audiovisual. There are 5 booths for like watching VHS tapes.
Right.
That means 5 VCRs. That means I can copy tapes.
Right, because that's how fan subs were done
Exactly.
back in the day. Was
so then I could copy my the Wings of Onyamas. I started sending it out to everybody, anybody who with a letter saying, hey, I'm trying to get involved in this project. I sent to Tom Clancy.
Yeah.
It's like Harlan Ellison, Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert, by the way, sent me a postcard saying, it was a very brief postcard, but he said, I want to watch this, but I don't have time right now. But it was like a handwritten postcard.
Nice.
I never forgot that he took time to do that. And as you know, he's been a supporter of anime over the years. So I got a very positive impression of him on that. I went to our local PBS station. A lot of people might think public television began in some place like Boston or New York. It actually began in Houston. KTH was the first station there. And they were very supportive. So I was just working towards all this in the early 90s, and at the same time, there was a local bar in Houston called Laveau's, after Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans. And they started having, and dig, this is like 1993, they started having anime nights to get people in. And I thought, and they're going to show a Legend of the Overfiend. I thought, this is great, 60 drunk rednecks watching Legend of the Overfiend. This I got to see. So I went to there, I wrote it all up, and in those days, I first got on the internet in 1989 in college, got my first account, and in those days it was all Usenet news groups.
Right.
So it was all text-based, and there's a group called Rec Arts Anime. So I wrote up a little article for it called Overfiend Night at Laveau's, and way over on the other side of the country, in San Francisco, California, at Viz, Trish Ledoux was editor of a new magazine called Animerica. Animerica, which lasted between 1992 and 2005, I think, was a homegrown magazine. As opposed to, say, New Type USA.
Right, which they brought over and...
Which lasted for a while.
Yeah,
The magazine business is tough. So she asked me if I would like to start writing reviews. And I said, yeah, sure. So that was one of the tracks. And in '94, I went to Ohayocon in Dallas, and I met one of the guys from Bondi, and we got into a conversation about Wings Oniyama. He said, "Oh yeah, we're going to release that, next year." Then I made a fateful decision. I was always carrying one of the fan subs of Oniyama's on me. I drew it out and gave it to him, and I said, "Mr. Yadomi, I'm a really big fan of this film, and I've been trying to promote it. Now it looks like you're going to give it an official release. I'd like to do whatever I can to help, work with it." So that was one of the ways I transitioned from being. The next thing I knew, I was, on the street, stapling up signs for showing the local theater. That also brings up one of the, you might call the moral issues in going from being just a fan to being a fan who's a pro, and that I understand a lot of fan translators that a lot of what guides them is they have a certain vision of the work. It's in their heart. It's the way they want it to be, the way they want it to sound, the way they want the lines to come off. And often they won't like the professional version for the reason that it's different.
Right.
And I didn't entirely like the dub of Wings Oniyama, so I had to make that kind of fateful decision. Was I just going to say, forget it, I'm not going to work with you guys? Or was I going to say, and you can call this a rationalization if you want, well, even so, people should appreciate this film, and they may still appreciate it. So, and besides, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just my point of view. Maybe other people will think this is fine. So I decided to stick with it, but it was definitely something which I wasn't entirely sure if it was right or not. So I began to be introduced to the world of moral complexity as a fan. Then in '94, I moved out to the Bay Area to start law school. But I also became an editor at Animerica. And at law school, you're taking all these student loans.
Right.
I was thinking, I'm having to write these papers for law school, and I'm having to pay them to write these papers.
Right.
Animerica's paying me. So this is ridiculous. This is totally, backwards. So I had the student loan thing is kind of like this tilting board trap. Remember, I said I used to play D&D.
Right.
And, you have like 3 segments to jump off the trap or you're going to fall in. So I said, I better get out of law school quick, or I'm going to owe so much money that I'll have to be a lawyer, because otherwise, I'll never be able to pay it back. So that was when I sort of gambled on a career as a editor at Animerica, someone working in the industry. There was not a lot of money in it. I was mostly surviving off my student loans the first few years. It wasn't until Pokemon came out that was a big hit.
Yeah, I could see that.
I started writing for Wizard magazine and for some British magazines as well. This is way before 24, but back then in '95, Kiefer Sutherland was doing anime voice acting for Armitage 3, and I got the chance to go down and interview him. Really, really nice guy, by the way. It looked like his handlers weren't going to give me the interview, and he just sort of went in there and kind of interposed himself. Like totally nice guy and nothing egotistical about him. Only guy I ever met who literally chain smoked. I'd heard about it, but he literally never stopped smoking. It's like as soon as one would burn out, he'd put the next one to it. It's like this long chain. I guess that's why he's got that voice of his. But I know it's just utterly fascinating, isn't it? Get to the point. In 1997, that's when I first started editing manga. And my first one was Neon Genesis Evangelion by Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. I don't have, being my first manga, of course, I didn't have any experience editing manga. The reason I was asked to do so was because I was known as a big Evangelion fan.
Right.
So even if I didn't have the expertise on the manga, at least I knew something about the series. So that was the beginning of my present career, and so I've been a manga editor now for 13 years. I guess you now know everything about me.
That's cool. So you work with Dark Horse now.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff does that entail?
Well, a manga editor is basically responsible for all stages of taking it from the original Japanese tankobon, untranslated, unlicensed, and sort of getting into that thing you can buy in Borders or Barnes & Noble. Often we are the ones to recommend that a book be licensed, in which case we have to do research into what the sales prospects of it are, what the likely costs are going to be. An important question is how long is the series? Like if it's going to be a really long series, that might be more of a gamble, because we can't guarantee people are going to stick with it.
Right, especially since it tends to be like the first issues tend to sell most, and it sort of, I've heard it dies off each consecutive volume sometimes.
That is correct. Oh My Goddess is our longest running series since 1994. It's actually the longest running Dark Horse title and longest running manga in English. But it's been a struggle sometimes to sort of keep it going. The newer volumes tend to sell better than the older ones. We've been going back and re-releasing the old ones as well.
There's a secret to that. It's because you number them now. Like the original ones, I remember trying to collect Oh My Goddess, and the spine never had which volume it was, so I was constantly confused on which volume I needed to buy. But the newer ones, I noticed they're numbered.
I used to hear back in the old days at Viz that one of the reasons why people were reluctant to number them was they thought it might discourage fans. They realized how many volumes there were. Like, oh, damn, we're never going to get to the end.
Well, I could see that too, actually.
Also, it's more tradition in American graphic novels to give things names instead of numbers.
Right.
If you look at our BPRD or Hellboy graphic novels, they all have like subtitles like King of Fear or War on Frogs or so forth, but not a number. So, but I agree that the numbering is more convenient.
Like, just a number somewhere so that I can go, okay, I'm on volume 5, now I need to make sure I buy volume 6.
Right.
And one time I think I actually ended up with something else. I ended up buying, jumping from 5 to like 9. I was like, what's going on? So, but yeah.
So series that are shorter, for example, one of our new series we're doing, Evangelion Campus Apocalypse, is only 3 volumes. So that becomes more attractive. It's less for risk. You might also consider the strategy of releasing them all collected together as an omnibus.
Right.
Of course, you would need the permission of the Japanese license holder to do that. So getting this information, you then go into what's called a costing meeting, in which you then present your details, and the accounting department draws them up like an Excel file, and it gets projected on the wall, and you make decisions about, if it sells 2,000, we'll do this. If it sells 3,000, we'll do that. You want to see where you break even. And, of course, these are just projections. There's no guarantee that people buy them. When you go to the buyers, and that means usually Diamond, you actually will bring the Japanese tankobon as visual aids. Because, you can tell a lot about the manga just by even without translation.
Oh, yeah.
So you show it to them and say, hey, it's this. It's got an anime. The previous titles did this much and so forth, and that might help them, encourage them to do greater advance orders. So this, of course, all assumes you get to license it. You make a bid, you make an offer, to the Japanese publishers. We have a director of Asian licensing who does that. He's fluent in Japanese. I don't speak it very well, not very well at all. And and of course they can turn it down, and you'll also be in competition with other publishers as well. But if you get it, you then make your plans and you put it on the schedule. And often we plan as far as 2 years out. It's often more common these days for us to release manga on a every 3 months basis, quarterly. The bookstores don't like so much anymore having manga shoved in their face. There's a lot of that happening several years ago. There's so many manga being shoved on the market. A bit of a glut.
Yeah, I noticed there seemed to sort of a boom and then drop off.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, where suddenly there was tons of manga everywhere you looked, and so you tend to get some of it was really good, some of it was not so good, but now it's sort of stabilized.
It's natural. It's just like the .com boom. I mean, you have a few things that are really good, and then everyone else jumps on the bandwagon. You never quite know what people are going to like, although the general rule is that if they liked it in Japan, they'll like it here. That's not always true. For example, in Japan, One Piece is bigger than Naruto.
Yeah.
My theory is because, whereas they have ninjas, they don't have pirates.
Right.
So they find the pirates more interesting. And especially when it comes to titles for older readers, there are some extremely successful titles in Japan, which nevertheless people don't read over here. Even today, most manga readers are teenagers. And that's not to say a number of teenage readers are also sophisticated and are willing to read stuff for older readers. And I really appreciate that. But there are also a lot of people who's they just want something, kawaii. And,
right.
And it's nothing wrong with that either. There's plenty of readers like that in Japan. Even in Japan, the biggest manga magazines are like the Shonen Jumps.
Right.
So the manga gets licensed. We need to acquire the materials from Japan, which have to be purchased separately. Materials meaning high-quality scans of either the original art or the film that was used to... but again, something better than you could get by simply scanning the book. And I said a lot of manga that haven't released in the U.S., not too many by Dark Horse, were literally done by scanning the book. One that we did do by scanning the book was Lone Wolf and Cub. That's because the manga was originally published in the 70s. And there are two ways to get the rights to a manga. You can either approach the publisher or you can approach the creator. Either of them can give you the rights, but if the creator gives you the rights, likely is they don't have any materials. They don't have any film or anything. The publisher has that. So all they can basically say is, yeah, I'm cool with you doing my manga, but you'll just have to scan the book. The original art may not be around. It's like, Clamp is a little bit unusual because they've held on to all their original art.
Right.
They literally have a vault they built for it. So it's like Akira. People in suits, under the liquid nitrogen atmosphere.
Do they also name it after Tetsujin 28, or?
I'm not sure what they call it. I think there is a keypad, actually, and so forth. But so for our Clamp projects, Clamp has literally been going back and scanning the original art. So it's it's as high quality as you can get. And then, of course, it has to be translated and lettered. And you prefer to work with people who you have some experience with, or at least have past experience, who can meet deadlines. That's a very important thing because you say, I know Dark Horse hasn't always been the best about this, but you say, we're going to put out a book in May, and you advertise it in Diamond Previews, where you're supposed to release it in May, and just not when you feel like it.
Right.
So everybody has to try and respect that and get things in on time. And, it's difficult because freelancers have lives, too.
Right.
As much as I hate to admit it. I've managed to pretty much dispense my own life, but I don't care who died. If you ever saw Animation Runner Kuromi, being a manga editor can be a little bit like that. So, I get all these in. We often do proofs via PDF. The actual pages are done as TIFFs, usually in Photoshop or Illustrator. So they take the raws originally in Japan. I give them a script in Microsoft Word, and then they put in the lettering. depending on the book, the lettering can be either sound effects can be either fully retouched, that is to say, the Japanese effects are erased and English are put in,
Right.
or they can be not translated at all, as in Hellsing, or they can be not translated but with a glossary in the back, as in the Kurosagi Corps delivery service, or they can be, and this is fairly common these days, left in but with subtitles in English.
Right.
I've been trying that on Evangelion. I was reluctant to do subtitles. The subtitles we're trying to do them somewhat artistically to respect the appearance of the original sound effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's a black effect, black subtitle, outline subtitle. Basically, sort of treat it as a bit of art on the page. I've seen some manga in which the subtitles use the same font as the dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and made no effort to match angles
Right.
and so forth. And I personally think that once you put subtitles on a page, the bottom line is you're introducing something new to the page that wasn't there originally. So you should try to have it be somewhat harmonious and respect the aesthetic of the art in a small way.
Have you been getting a good response with the subtitling, or do you not even know? Or
Not too many specific comments on it. I haven't asked people about that. I am very happy when people send in letters. I think it's somewhat surprisingly hard to get in fan letters. I say surprisingly because people have no reluctance to put their stuff on forums and
Right.
DeviantArt and all that. But when you ask people to then send in letters, often, I don't know, people get a little shy. Maybe it's because once you're in the book, it's up there as a permanent record, and if you get better 6 months later, you'll be embarrassed by
right.
your old stuff. But I do like it when people have the chance to actually, be involved in the book and become a part of it. So I like it when people take that opportunity.
So what are you editing right now? What's your current projects on your table?
Oh gosh, sorry for the strong language. This is AWO. I should swear more like AWO.
There you go.
I'm doing Chobits, Card Captor Sakura. Those, of course, are 2 plant projects. These are just stuff at present. Magic Knights Rare Earth, the Kurosagi Corps delivery service, which, as you know, we're trying to develop into a feature film with Universal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Neon Genesis Evangelion, 2 series, the Shinji Ikari Raising Project, and Campus Apocalypse. Oh My Goddess. What am I forgetting? I hope I'm not forgetting anything. It's a lot of work, actually.
Yeah. It's a lot of series. And I know Dark Horse has even more than just that.
That's right. There are other editors at Dark Horse who work on manga. I'm the only one who only works on manga, though. So the others also work on American comics. I like the fact that in our catalog, because it's alphabetical, Conan is right next to Chobits.
Nice.
So
That's a nice.
The juxtaposition of those two pretty much sums up, Dark Horse in the 21st century.
So speaking of AWO and a manga that, that they're sad that is not being released, the Starving Man. I was asked to ask for a story, but not from Volume 2, Volume 1. Specifically the physics of the horse race.
Oh, that. Well, as I've said, for Kazuo Koike, pretty much all Kazuo Koike plots are about revenge. That's the standard plot.
Right.
But I want to say it's the Hagakure. There's a famous book on what it means to be a samurai, the philosophy of samurai. It's one Forrest Whitaker's always quoting in Ghost Dog. And they talk about how if you're going to do something, you can't hesitate. You got to go straight for the enemy. Well, Kazuo Koike is the opposite of that. It's like, he's to go from A to B, he's going to go through Q, T, Z.
Right.
He's like the family circus. Can you help Billy find his way home? It's that dotted line that's going around the neighborhood.
It's kind of like Crying Freeman, how he can't just go and kill somebody. He has to kill somebody to follow them, to kill somebody else.
Exactly.
To follow them, eventually gets to his target.
And like in Wounded Man, he's got to have money to finance his revenge.
Right.
So they decide to fix a horse race using elaborate electrical engineering diagrams. They're going to fix the horse race by burying taser-like electrodes in the field so they can shock the right horses at the right moment. But it's not just enough to tell you this. He gives you the complete electrical wiring diagram with the resistance and the ohms and all that, and lays it all out there. So that's the scene from Volume 1, I think, that I'm talking about. it's pretty hardcore stuff. It's I call it like the Taxi Driver of manga. It literally was drawn during the era that Taxi Driver, came out. The 70s in some ways were the greatest era for manga because it was when adults had started to read manga in large numbers, but it was before it became respectable. So it was very... one way I like to... You have to know a lot of American comics to get this comparison, but one way I like to compare The Starving Man is if Wally Wood's canon had been written by Robert Crumb. So it's this very manly adventure-style manga with lots of, contemporary sex and violence, but it's all done in a total anti-establishment and completely politically incorrect, attitude. So it's, it's very, it's an awesome work.
Let's see.
It's too good for this world.
It's true, at least for America so far.
Yes.
I always hear about it, but I've never actually had a chance to track any of it myself, because it's one of those things that was only 2 volumes were ever released at all, and so they're out of print, so it's hard to get a hold of.
It's kind of manga like, okay, you're in a motel, suddenly the cops are outside, you got to get away, but you're not just going to get away, you're going to set the hotel on fire on your way out, and do it in some extremely creative fashion.
So what are your favorites? What was your favorite manga releases that Dark Horse isn't doing, but you just like reading anyways?
Hellsing. It's like Hellsing's my favorite manga that Dark Horse has released, and that's rather interesting because I'm not a fan of like vampires in particular, or like Nazis, or like secrets of the Roman Catholic Church. But the great thing about the manga is it takes all these total cliches and just puts the pedal to the metal. You realize if you're going to deal in this stuff, you can't be half-assed. You got to be fully assed. And like, have you ever met Kote Hirana?
I have not.
He kind of looks like the Major from,
right.
Walking by in that coat and all that, just grinning. He's got those, and you can just tell his like incredible energy and glee. He's just having so much fun. A lot of manga, it's like, why are you bothering with this? This is the same as everything else. It's like, but you just see the energy and enthusiasm and style and grace. He's got to be like one of the greatest inkers in the history of manga.
Oh yeah, because everyone's just grinning. Like that's my favorite parts of the of the series, both manga and anime, especially in Ultimate. It's because just watching everyone smile at each other.
Yeah, everyone in there is nuts.
Yeah,
it's like they're all crazy fanatics,
and they're happy with that.
It's there are some odd things about Hellsing when you stop to think about it. I was talking about how no one ever comments on... I mean, people notice that one of the main issues in Hellsing is Catholics versus Protestants.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore. 50 years ago would have meant something. Or if you're in Northern Ireland, it might mean something. But like, no one really cares about the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant anymore. Another weird thing, you think about Millennium and all that, and the Major, he's in the SS.
Yeah.
Now, what was it the SS did in real life? There was a particular type of person the SS really didn't like and spent all their time trying to kill people. That's never brought up in there. Like, he totally removed all the racist elements.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess it's because he just liked the idea of the SS as these bunch of really theatrical, sinister badasses. But it's just amazing how he just dropped, all that stuff about, ethnic cleansing and concentration camps. Well, never mind. I just find it's amazing that it's sort of, I don't know if that even would be possible. I mean, compare that to like, I think, Tarantino's new film.
Oh yeah, Inglourious Basterds.
I think that is something of the spirit of Hellsing in it, in terms of its craziness and all that. But of course, Inglourious Basterds is completely aware of the whole issue of like what the Nazis were about. I think the combination of the fact that Japan hasn't fought a war in 65 years, and also something people always sort of forget about the Japanese. It's kind of obvious they were on the Nazi side.
Yeah,
it's like so when they weren't really so enthusiastic about the whole racial cleansing thing. You may have read Adolf by Tezuka. It talks about how a lot of Japanese actually helped Jews, but they didn't. People get freaked out when they see all these Nazis in manga and anime. They forget they weren't the enemy; they are the ally. So why should Japanese people instinctively think of Nazi Germany as bad as Americans do? I mean, when you think about it, there's no logical reason for it. They were on their side.
Right.
So I think it's that kind of weird historical situation that allows them to have people like the Major. Because if Hellsing had done in America, you would never be able to, you'd always be thinking about the fact that why don't these guys ever, bring up, the Holocaust and all that.
Right.
But because it's in Japan, it creates this kind of weird sort of historical zone, which is different from ours. But I also think one of the reasons I love Hellsing is I'm a manga editor, and I think that the adaptation of Hellsing is great. Dwayne Johnson, who I've never met, I think he lives in the East Coast, does an absolutely fantastic adaptation. And he understands the spirit of Hellsing. These characters are crazy, and you've got to make them sound that way. It's not going to work to have them be real calm. I love the Major's accent, and you just have to put that enthusiasm in there. And the editor, Tim Irvin Gore, does things that I wouldn't have the guts to do. He'll leave in untranslated bits of Japanese English, and sometimes they don't entirely make sense. Like they're doing a news report from Alucard shooting up that hotel in Rio de Janeiro. And the news report says gun genocide. But you sort of get the idea.
Yeah.
There's one great scene where Millennium Zeppelins are over Operation Sea Lion 2. They're over London, and Anderson sees them coming in, and Hirano is written in English almost illegibly. Anderson is quoting the psalm about how man comes up like, the grass and is cut down like a flower. It's exactly the kind of thing Anderson would say in a moment like this. But it's like hissing out of his mouth because Anderson is so angry. It's and it's coming out like smoke. I might have been tempted to actually ask the letterer to re-letter it so it was more legible, and that would have been the wrong decision. Tim knew to sort of leave it alone and to just let the kind of style of Hirano flow. So maybe these are things that only manga editors care about, but I think it affects the way the work comes across. So there's lots of other manga I like at Dark Horse, but I always mention Hellsing as a favorite. I'm going to have to get a new favorite, I guess, because it's coming to an end.
Right. Now, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I've heard back before Hellsing really came out in America, there was a discussion whether or not they should name Alucard or Alucard. I heard the creator wanted the R, but they went with the L because he thought everyone uses the L, so I wanted to use the R. But I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, as I'm always saying, my favorite line is, I'm not the editor of the title, so I didn't know about that discussion. Alucard, to get the spelling backwards right, Alucard would be correct. So I personally would have been in favor of that. The problem is, as everybody knows, that they're the same sound in Japanese.
Right.
There's no difference between the R and the L. So Japanese simply doesn't have as many sounds as English does. So I can understand why it might not. And there were some instances in Hellsing where that confusion was left in. For example, you see LIO at one point, and it's clearly supposed to be Rio.
Right.
So I don't actually know about that issue.
Okay, so these are some more general Carl questions, not so much what you do, but more about yourself. What do you do to kick back and relax?
What was that? What was that word you mentioned? Relax. What does that mean? I don't know if I've learned that one yet. No, these things are very busy these days. To relax, gosh, that's a tough one. I pretty much work on manga, 24/7. So
right.
It's that's a problem having a laptop. You're never really out of the office. I'm hoping to schedule some relaxation into 2011.
Okay, well, that's a good date for it.
But this year isn't looking too good for relaxation.
All right.
I'm literally working on manga in my hotel room here.
Well, so do you ever have times where you'll have issues with a certain phrase, you're not quite sure how to translate it or have it translated, or how to edit it, and inspiration just hits you at random moments, or do you just sit down and just do it?
I will. Usually, I'll get into a kind of a flow, and that's a good place to be because things are going. For me, I think at least one of the keys in manga editing is to try and empathize with the characters, see the way they see the situation, because that's reality is, so much of reality is made up in the way we see events. I mean, there's obviously an exterior thing. If the ceiling falls in on us right now, it doesn't matter how we feel about it. It's going to fall in. But for a lot of things, including relationships, politics, and so forth, people have their own viewpoint of the world. So when you're editing a manga, you try to figure out, what are these guys' viewpoints? What are their delusions? What are their obsessions? And from knowing that, then it's like a musical composition. You establish these elements and they flow together and create a theme. There are situations where I will come across something in Japanese. I don't know Japanese well enough to translate manga on my own, but I do know enough to ask questions of translators. So if I come across something where I suspect that this could have been translated differently, I'll often go back to the translator and ask them about it. And I'm interested, I'm always interested, and this is one of the reasons I often do note sections in the back. I'm interested in how people phrase things in Japanese. I'm interested in things like when people use English loan words, how they use them and why. So I like to take notes of these kind of things and let people know about the kind of raw material that goes into it. You notice the big difference between the way I answer that question about relaxing and we get back to manga editing. Oh, thank God, manga editing, so I can talk about what's relaxed.
Well, it's really nice to be able to do something that you really love to do. So
that is true. It's I think I worked out that there are fewer people who do. There are more active duty astronauts at NASA than people who do what I do.
Right.
Considering how accomplished it can be to be an astronaut, I'm not sure if that's a proud boast, but it is a little unusual, and I guess I'm doing it in part because I was willing to stick with it, even though it wasn't easy to make a living, in the first few years. But I'm very glad to have the opportunity to do so.
What are your favorite parts of anime cons?
Meeting new people, and the thing about anime cons is that you go around the country, and every convention has a local scene, a different mix of people. You'll see people, of course, that you see all the time, and it's great to see old friends, but it's also great to meet new people, and the mix is always different. I think that we probably have a much more diverse fan scene in America than they do in Japan, naturally, because Japan's a smaller country,
right,
more homogenous and less population. Manga creators and anime creators will often say that Americans seem more fresh and optimistic than Japanese fans often are. Because Japanese fans can be a bit cynical. They know where all the bodies are buried.
Right.
But also, organized fan stuff is often more commercial in Japan. There's Komiket, which of course is done by the fans, and other doujinshi conventions. But there's so many events that are sponsored by record labels, like you have to show up, sit down, watch the idol singer wave, buy your stuff, get up and leave. In America, almost all conventions are created by fans, and they're a lot more spontaneous. And it's for the most part, we brought the stuff here. It wasn't pushed on us, and it was never really meant to be seen by anyone but Japanese people, and yet everyone around the world, likes it. One thing I was talking about in the back of the most recent edition of Evangelion, the Shinji Ikari Raising Project, Volume 3, was about anime fans. I mentioned that I discovered anime in Tehran, and I was talking about how if you can't Google Arabic, and most people can't, you're never going to know about all the anime and manga fans there are who use Arabic. Ironically, since Arabic is written right to left, like
right.
Japanese. But yeah, people in the Arabic-speaking world got to see all kinds of stuff that we never saw. All the great 70s children's classics. The Rose of Versailles, the greatest shoujo story ever, and a lot of people would think they'd have a stereotype of the Muslim world. They wouldn't want to see a story about a female hero. Well, no, they do. And Iraq was a major center of anime dubbing in the 1970s. Even Anno's series before Evangelion, Nadia, which is a big hit, that showed in the Middle East. Future Boy Conan, the only series that Miyazaki ever directed, also one of Anno's favorites. So I just try to, and I not only do I get to meet local fans like from the Midwest here, but at certain conventions I'll get to meet foreign fans. The same way that there are Americans who will backpack through Europe,
right?
There are anime fans from other parts of the world who will road trip and take buses and planes and go to various American anime conventions. You just have to listen for the accents. You realize, hey, that guy sounds Australian. I met a Saudi fan at in Chicago at Anime Central. So yeah, people are always going to surprise you the most because people are so different and unpredictable. So that goes back to when I was in college and how I didn't want to form an anime club because I didn't want people to think you had to be one type of person or a certain type of person. My dream is to have everybody who might possibly like anime come to like it. And you're not going to do that if you're going to be exclusionary.
Right.
You got to be as wide. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people who are never going to like it just because not everybody likes animation, period. Not everybody likes Japanese stuff. It's just not going to work for them. But there's over 300 million people in this country. I'm sure there could be a lot more people who are into anime who don't know about it yet. So even if you just get a small percentage of them, it's quite a lot.
What are the things you like most about being a guest at anime cons?
Well, I suppose I don't have to wait in lines. So, very Bob and Emily DeJesus, who invited me here, I've known them for a long time, and it was very nice of them to invite me. Being a guest means I have the opportunity to communicate with more people because, people are nice enough to come to me, at panels and so forth. I might have the opportunity to put on a party. And I guess you might say, it makes going to a convention a lot more convenient. So I'm very happy to receive the invitation.
Do you ever get crazy fans?
Sure. I don't know. I'm crazy, so I don't know. It's like there's polite crazy and there's not polite crazy. So as long as you're polite, it's fine to be crazy. It's like I like to even if you're completely insane, try to be considerate of other people. It's like that's the real trick. It's like it's not so much the mental imbalance that's a problem. It's the not being able. Now look at how I've been going on with no consideration for you guys. You might have lives, you might want to do something else. But people who don't seem to be able to see that they're going on, and you have to. Ideally, we can all step out from ourselves a little bit and say, "How am I sounding? How am I coming off?" It's one thing to be nervous. That's one thing, but to just I really think you know what I mean. So, but even so, that's not necessarily a bad person or anything. It's like you just sort of got to deal with it and move on. And also, if it comes to things like anger, I understand fans' passions, because again, I'm a fan who works professionally. It doesn't mean I stop being a fan.
Right.
And I talked about how when I got involved with the commercial release of Royal Space Force, I had to sort of tamp down some of my own issues about, this doesn't sound like my fan subtitle. The lines are different. This is not quite the vision of the film I had in my head. What I should have remembered, of course, is that it's not my film anyway. I didn't make the film. I didn't write the film. But I understand those feelings. So if people are upset about things in adaptation, I don't simply say, well, never mind, you're just a fan, what do you mean? Because I understand where they're coming from. And I understand that certain choices have to be made and not others. So, again, that's why I at least try to approach every work with sincerity and try to have empathy for the particular characters. Perhaps my interpretations won't be exactly the same as someone else, but at least I like the work, and I'm going to try to do it with an honest heart. So for that reason, hopefully I understand a lot of the passions that fans might have.
Can you think of the craziest fan or the most impolite, craziest fan you've dealt with at all, sometime recently, past, whatever?
I don't know. I don't know if it was directed particularly at me. Probably the craziest convention I've ever been to was there used to be a con in the Bay Area called Anime America. It split off from the Anime Expo, and this was in 1996. And this is during the Atlanta Olympics. The con was over the 4th of July weekend, and we just heard word about the bombing that happened in the Olympic Plaza, and I was out there and suddenly I heard fans saying, "Oh yeah, tomorrow they're going to declare martial law. This has all been planned out." And I suddenly realized that I was, in the middle of a group of conspiracy types, and that was kind of a reality slippage, type of moment. I'm sure there's all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on at a con that I never see. But again, like, when we consider the diversity of anime and manga and what it's like, and and what some of its deeper, darker portions are like, it's kind of hard to condemn other people's craziness. I'm busy editing plenty of my own. I think for the most part, I think fans have been pretty polite and pretty patient, especially when I go on and on. So I guess maybe I've been lucky with, I haven't had too much trouble like that.
Okay. This is the part where we ask the hard-hitting, really, really punch-in-the-gut questions we call the Awesome Five. What's your favorite candy or sweet?
God, I'm just a bundle of. Can we ask more questions about manga editing? No, it's like my favorite candy or sweet. Okay, that's a serious question. Probably something sour. Oh, let me think. Gosh, I would say that right now it's those giant-sized nerds from Wonka.
Excellent.
That's probably enough for time.
If you are stuck on a desert island and you had to choose 3 tools to ensure survival, what would they be?
You said tool.
Yeah, I did.
To ensure survival. Okay, so I can't just give up. I have to try to live. Desert island. I would guess a fishing tackle, something to collect water in, and a lens to make fire with.
Okay. Now this one is probably more up your alley. What project that you have worked on in the past or upcoming in the future you feel would most benefit by the inclusion of giant robots?
There's so many things that could benefit from the inclusion of giant robots, but what doesn't have giant robots? That's the problem. Even Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service has a robot at one point. Eagle. That was the manga about. This is a Viz. It's about the guy running for president of the United States, and there were no giant robots in it. And I personally think that elections would be a lot more interesting if the Republican and the Democratic candidate each had a giant robot and slugged it out over America.
I think so.
They might be really giant robots, so kind of like on the... Even Gunbuster might not be big enough, because you're not just slugging it out over one city. They'd have to be big enough you could literally slug it out over America.
Oh, yeah.
So, although, wait a minute, now logistically that's going to be complicated, because you just can't have robots standing on the East Coast and the West Coast, because everyone knows the coasts go to the Democrats. And you want to have one in flyover country where the real Americans live. And so, yeah, you're going to have to have... you're going to have a robot standing in Kansas, and then maybe one robot standing in Oregon. So it's going to be tough. But yeah, it can benefit.
Okay, some say that you can judge a society based on the monsters that they create. What would your monster be?
You mean, what would be the American monster?
What you think would be the appropriate American monster?
It probably would be composed of, McDonald's materials. So maybe like a giant mass of McDonald's takeout, like McRibs and fries and whatever the promotional sandwiches are this month. So I think that pretty much sums up the spirit of America better than anything, and also be really greasy. So.
Oh yeah, maybe call it the Biggest Mac.
Yeah.
And here's the hardest one of all. How many awesomes out of awesome are you?
I don't even know if I have some awe, let alone awesome. My awesome's more like aw, some. I don't know. I'm working on getting to an awesome. So for now, it's probably somewhere between 0 and 1.
Okay.
So.
That's our grading scale for things.
Uh-huh.
Because we don't believe in actual numerical grading scales, because that don't really tell you anything. So we feel that awesomes out of awesome is the appropriate,
It's the sum of all awe.
Yes.
So.
And just for the record, we feel that you're incredibly awesome. We're going to give you 15 things to edit out of awesome.
Oh my God, 15 things to edit. I already have so much. It's it's like I sort of see the future stretching before me in terms of pages need to be translated,
right.
Pages that need to be lettered. I mean, it's great when the actual book comes out. You know, I have the shelf, and every once in a while I put another book on the shelf. It's like the Grim Reaper, you know, toiling up souls and all that. But there's just, you know, there's the sheer physicality of what I do. It's like, you know, paper cuts are an occupational hazard because you're having these like big sheets of papers, like 300 together, and like, you know, they got weight on them, and you're shredding your fingers. But a lot of people don't realize that manga are actually products made in a factory. There's nothing virtual about them at all. They're big sheets of paper which are fed through a machine and like folded and, you know, bound and all that. And when it comes to Chobits, it's going to be printed in Canada, and we're actually going to have someone who is going to fly up there and stand next to the printing press and watch the copies as they go out. And if the colors start to slip, say, hold it, adjust that again. So that's the kind of quality control. It's like being on, you know, I was going to say a Toyota assembly line. That's not such a good comparison these days. But yeah, it's like I'm very grateful to the fans, because the same fans who have grown up with the internet are also the people who have bought all the manga. And they still like reading books, which is cool. You know, we're looking into electronic, you know, distribution of manga too. But for the most part, the core of the industry today is in physical books. And I do think that there is a different experience in reading a book than there is reading something 200 pages on screen. But again, in order to make that, we have to have a lot of quality control. One of the great things about working for Dark Horse is that they publish so many different types of things. Viz, of course, is also a great company, but they only do Japanese books.
Right.
And for the most part, they only do licensed material, although that's changing a little bit. But Dark Horse has a lot of original material and a lot of American work. So I'm dealing with people. One thing that I never have to do is I never have to look at a blank page and summon manga out of it. At least the manga already exists in Japan. It doesn't have to be drawn or written. It has to be translated and lettered. But the guys I work with, they create comics out of nothing. That they have to go from an idea to a full-blown comic. And considering all the Eisner Awards they win, they do a great job. That's the awesome. The co-writers at Dark Horse I get to work with. And it's really great to... I think that among manga companies, Dark Horse probably has the greatest crossover audience among comic fans. Like, all those dudes who were buying Lone Wolf and Cub, you know, who bought, the people who put it over the 1 million mark, so many of those people were comic book fans. They weren't manga fans, per se. They wouldn't necessarily buy, you know, Love Hina or anything.
Right.
But everyone likes Samurai, you know, so the, you know, that, Blade of the Immortal. A lot of the fan art we get for Blade of the Immortal are from people who really are quite professional. And I think they want to sort of show off their stuff and, you know, get involved in comics. Whereas a lot of the fan art I get for Oh My Goddess and Evangelion are people who are more just fans, who don't necessarily want to work professionally in the industry, but just want to have some fun. So Dark Horse is a wonderful opportunity to really see all sides of comics publishing, including the making of original comics. And they've always had the attitude that sort of, no matter what country it's from, there are good comics everywhere. I think this helps us also when we deal with Japanese publishers, because they know that we're not looking at manga simply as a commodity. It's not a magic, you know, source of money and all that. I mean, we like to make money too. But we're like them. That is to say, we know what it's like to create something out of nothing. We do it all the time with our books. We know what it is to sweat and work with, you know, writers and artists and, you know, turn that concept from a blank page into a finished graphic novel. So we go through what they go through. And we may be comics and they may be manga, but we can understand, you know, the struggles of an editor. And also we've been around for 23 years. So we're pretty serious about our business. We can't always do everything that we'd like to do. And sometimes we have to cancel series. But the company is still here, so... especially, you know, in today's recession.
Right.
It's important.
It is very important. Well, I hope you have many, many more great years to come of Dark Horse. Hope you all do just fine.
Well, thank
Minimum amounts of cancels as possible. Lots of new stuff, and thank you very much for talking
really,
off our ears.
You really, for the first time, made me think seriously about candy. It's like I don't know anyone's ever asked me that question before.
Well, that's what we're here is because, you know, there's some things that are awesome, and candy's one of those things, and no one ever thinks about it. And yeah.
What's your favorite?
Oh, God. See, no one asks me that question, so I never think about it.
Say it's awesome.
I'm with Snickers.
And you?
Does Pocky count?
You have to determine the kind of Pocky.
The kind of Pocky.
Like, there's flavors, so you have to choose.
Most likely the dark chocolate kind of Pocky.
Now, they made like a Snickers Pocky.
That's not bad, although I would think a Pocky is more your favorite snack than if you're...
That's true. It's true.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If Pocky doesn't count, then I'd say Reese's, because it's got both chocolate and peanut butter in. I don't think you can possibly beat that.
Yeah, so, you get your chocolate or peanut butter chocolate.
Yeah.
And you?
I'm not much on candy, but if we're talking about the strict definition, mine would probably be Gobstoppers.
Yeah, another fine Wonka product. Yeah. Well, okay, cool.
All right, and for that, we're going to close out. We'll see you next time.